Hey everyone, welcome to Rationable Conversations. Today we are going to be continuing on our journey through the world of alternative medicine with one of the stalwarts of the field, actually. Not of alternative medicine, but of actually being a skeptic and promoting investigation and testing of alternative medicine. Today we are going to be discussing a few of them, acupuncture as well, homeopathy, and other natural remedies. So stick around. This is going to be one fantastic trip. Hey, welcome back. Today I have with me Dr. Edzard Ernst. Actually, is the doctor title still entitled or just Edzard?
Well, you just call me Edzard. Yeah, that's fine. Makes it
All right.
simpler.
Yeah. So Edzard Ernst has also been a homeopathic doctor. He started out that way and he found his way out of it and has been promoting skepticism towards alternative medicine and has also written a fantastic book that I've read with Simon Singh called Trick or Treatment. Very clever name, that too. And very informative. So I've read most of it and then I dip into it every now and then to figure out just for reference, so to speak. But Edzard, how are you doing today? Welcome on the show.
Hi. Nice to be with you.
It's a pleasure to meet you finally. It's I've been seeing your conversations on Twitter and of course with your book, and you definitely are very well known in the field of skepticism in alternative medicine. Tell us your story first. How did you get into homeopathy in the first place?
Well, how did I get into medicine in the first place? I wanted to become a musician when I was a young chap. I was very enthusiastic, and I thought this would be a nice career. But I had a wise mother who said, "Why don't you do both and study medicine and music, and then you will see how it goes." And that's what I did. And she knew very well that medicine one day would take me over because it's not a part-time job.
Oh,
So
absolutely not.
I did study medicine. I also studied psychology. And when I was finished with medicine, that was in Germany in the late 70s.
Hmm.
And there was a surplus of doctors, would you believe it? So I couldn't find a hospital job, which I needed to go anywhere really. And I applied for various posts and eventually got the job in Germany's only homeopathic hospital. And I wasn't deterred by that because for me, homeopathy was just medicine. I was brought up on homeopathy. Our family doctor was a homeopath, not just any homeopath, but a very prominent homeopath in Germany. And for me, until I studied medicine, homeopathy was just a branch of medicine. Then, of course, during my studies in medicine, I quickly comprehended that homeopathy was different. It was different in the sense that it enraged our pharmacology professor who told us it was nonsense. And then I started the job in the homeopathic hospital, and I was really amazed because patients did get better with as our pharmacology professor used to call them. Uh, so I was puzzled to say the least. But that was a relatively short period of my life. It was about half a year. And then I changed into various other jobs, as one does, as a young physician, and never forgot homeopathy. How could I forget it? I was I was treated as a boy with homeopathy. It was my first exposure to patients. I was quite impressed by that. I think every young doctor is impressed when he sees his first patients.
Absolutely.
You're scared shitless too. So yeah, and never forgot homeopathy. Then I had a complete career change yet again. I went to London from
Oh,
Munich and first worked in psychiatry for several months. Didn't like that at all. And then I accepted a research post. I basically did research into what is called hemorrheology. For those who don't know what it is, I don't blame you. It's the study of the fluidity of blood. So that totally fascinated me for a very long time. For
oh,
about
very interesting.
for about 10 years, I became a scientist. I was trained properly as a scientist. And here I have to add that as a medic, as a student, you are not trained as a scientist. The study of medicine is so crammed full with facts that you haven't the time to think. You haven't the time to think critically. And maybe that's why I ended up in homeopathy for a little while.
Ah, it's something that I've heard about engineers as well, which for some reason it's all applied science, but that sense of criticism and skepticism is not really taught as a part of the course because obviously they're very extensive. So while you were studying this, so you were studying medicine and homeopathy at the same time, is that what I understood?
No, I finished my completely conventional studies of medicine in 1978, and my first job was in a hospital of homeopathy. It was led by a homeopath. It was the only hospital in Germany which was
Hmm.
completely homeopathic. And I learned homeopathy never doing courses, doing exams, and such things. I'm not even sure that they existed in Germany at the time. Homeopaths are very angry at me when I say I'm a homeopath or I'm a trained homeopath. And they point out that I haven't got the slightest background in homeopathy, which in a way is true, but I learned it on the bedside as medics do learn stuff after their final exams on the
Hmm.
bedside. There's no special study of any therapeutic modality. You learn
Hmm.
it while you do it. Uh,
Ah. So
uh,
were you learning this? So how did you pick up things? Was there a doctor that kind of told you the ropes
yeah,
or
exactly. Like, well, you go into any medical field, whether gynecology or neurology or rheumatology, you enter the field and you know very little about it, and you need somebody who tells you how it's done. You need to obviously study quite a bit and learn as you do it. That's how it is, not just with homeopathy, but with any other speciality. And this
uh,
is how this is how I was taught uh, several other modalities as well, acupuncture, herbal medicine, etc. It's not by going to university courses. It's by doing it and having a teacher who shows you how to do it. Anyway,
so
uh,
yeah. Sorry,
uh,
carry on.
then having become a scientist changed my outlook almost completely. Began to learn how to think critically, and I questioned a lot of things that I had been doing. And after about 10 years of basic research, I went back into clinical medicine. I became, I went back to Munich. I became a specialist in physical medicine and rehabilitation. I became professor of physical medicine and rehabilitation first in Hanover, Germany. Then I got a chair in Vienna, Austria, in physical medicine and rehabilitation, took over a very large department, lots of responsibility, etc., etc. And all these years, in the back of my mind, there was these questions about homeopathy. So at that stage, I had reached the point where I could really decide what my department was doing, and every now and then decided, I decided to do a study of homeopathy and other alternative treatments and published things. And one day I saw an advertisement in the New Scientist, actually, that Exeter was looking to establish a chair in complementary medicine. So
Oh.
I applied,
Hmm.
and at first I couldn't believe that a full professor from Vienna was applying to a backwater like Exeter. To a chair which wasn't even a life position. I had a life position in Vienna that I was willing to basically halve my salary by going to Exeter and do that. And why did I do that? Well, Vienna did get on my nerves quite a lot. And that is a different story and would need another hour to explain really. But I applied for that new chair and got the post and established a team of a multidisciplinary team to do research, which wasn't quite clear at the beginning because in Exeter I originally was meant to do a lot of teaching. And I completely redirected that into just research. So we didn't see patients. I did some teaching at the medical school, but very little. And we were almost 99% research based. And that's why we were hugely productive. We published all in the 20 years that I was in Exeter, over 1,000 papers in peer-reviewed journals, books, etc., etc. And that's what we did. And having been trained as a scientist, it was clear to me that I wasn't going to promote homeopathy or any other treatment. I wasn't going to advance the business of homeopaths. All I had to do on the academic level was to answer questions. And for me, main two questions were, does it work and is it safe? That the latter question upset a lot of people because they said, of course, alternative medicine is safe. Don't be stupid. And I spent quite some time showing that this assumption is not true. Homeopathy may be safe, but the homeopath isn't safe.
Yeah.
And that's quite an important differentiation.
Yeah.
So we were hugely productive. I can honestly say the most productive research unit worldwide in alternative medicine.
So what are
And
the kind of studies that you did? What are the topics that you did the studies on? Like, was it
well,
across all natural medicine or
I,
alternative medicine rather?
across basically across everything. But as you probably know, there are so many alternative treatments.
They're more popping up all the time.
Yeah, and they're popping up all the time. So we couldn't do everything. Our focus was on homeopathy, herbal medicine, uh, chiropractic, osteopathy, and acupuncture. But we did other things too, like spiritual healing, dietary issues, etc., etc. So quite opportunistic in the sense that when we saw the opportunity, also when we saw the opportunity for funding a trial, we just went for it. And I have to say that collaboration with alternative practitioners became more and more difficult because we got after about 5 to 10 years, we had a reputation of being very much anti alternative medicine, which is a nonsense because I'm not anti, I'm in favor of evidence. I'm totally subscribed to the principles of evidence-based medicine. And for that, you need to establish the evidence. And for that, you need to do clinical trials. So the collaboration became more and more difficult. And that was one of the reasons why we also did a lot of reviews, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, where we just collect all the evidence that there's out there for a certain subject, then condense it if possibly statistically in a meta-analysis, and create a new bottom line, like acupuncture for back pain, for instance, is one of the things. So in total, we did about 40 clinical trials, which is already pretty much, because you can't in any one year you can't possibly do more than 2 clinical trials as a research unit. We were just 20 odd people,
Ah,
but we did around 300 systematic reviews.
wow.
So
That's
it,
huge.
that became our real expertise, or part of our real expertise, and probably we are better known for our systematic reviews than our clinical trials. In fact, there are some idiots who say Professor Ernst has never done a clinical trial, so he should shut up. But I've done around 40, which is more than any of these idiots have.
That is definitely true. But the first thing about homeopathy, because I spoke to Dr. Arif Hussain, who is based in Kerala in India. And he's doing a lot of important work in also in testing alternative medicines, and working with Dr. Abby Phillips. Interviews of theirs are links in the description. They've been doing a lot of work because Dr. Abby Phillips found that there are people coming in, especially after COVID. There were a lot of people coming in to him. He's a biliary specialist. So people were coming in with non-alcoholic liver failure. And he found that the only cause of that was because they were consuming copious amounts of things like giloy and ashwagandha and other Ayurvedic preparations, because which everybody thinks doesn't have any side effects, but they definitely do. And especially when your liver is trying to filter out all the toxins from these compounds, which we really don't know enough about, your liver has a tough time doing it. So they've been doing a lot of excellent work, and they're following in your footsteps. But I wanted to ask you a couple of things about homeopathy. So with Dr. Theruvat, we got quite a bit of insight into how homeopathy came into being, and that it was essentially a German creation, which is something, oddly enough, a lot of Indians have a thing that if it's a German creation, it must be amazing. Look at the BMW. Which I have to give them, that BMW is fantastic. But this was, of course, pre-scientific times, and it was better than the other alternatives, which was bloodletting and inducing vomiting and diarrhea and all sorts of things. But these days, it has become extremely popular, especially in India, where it has been since almost very soon after it came out of Germany. So how is homeopathy prevailing in Germany and in Europe in general right now? What do you think?
Well, I think England or the UK was the first country where the first European country where things changed dramatically in relation to homeopathy.
Hmm.
Homeopathy was declared to be part of the NHS, which, by the way, is today celebrating a birthday. The NHS today
Oh,
is 75 years old.
oh,
So
wonderful.
when it was created, people defined certain things, and one of the things they defined, that homeopathy belongs to the NHS. So when I arrived in the UK, we had 5 homeopathic hospitals. Um,
Oh,
Today we have 0.
wonderful.
So, so, so when I'm really optimistic, I think that my work has contributed to that decline.
I was
I,
just about to ask you that. If your work had actually
I,
contributed to that.
I should also, at this point, we have to mention the royal family, of course. The royal family,
Yes.
almost since the creation of homeopathy 200 years ago, the royal family has been advocating homeopathy and using homeopathy a lot. And this royal protection, people say, is the reason why it was the only alternative treatment declared to be inside the fence of the NHS 75 years ago. So what changed? Basically, the evidence changed, and I certainly contributed to that. And people in the NHS were forced to realize that homeopathy is just an expensive placebo,
Mm.
and that they maybe shouldn't be paying for it. Nobody wants people to not have access. Well, I don't want to forbid homeopathy. I don't want to forbid anything. I want people to be well informed and make up their own choices. And that's precisely what we did. And eventually, the message was received on at the level of the NHS, and they said, okay, we better stop that. Um, and as I said, today we don't have a single homeopathic hospital. The London Homeopathic Hospital still exists, but it has renamed itself, and it's called the Royal London Hospital for Integrated Medicine or something like that. And
Ah,
the late Queen was the patron, and now King Charles is the patron.
wow.
So
That,
it's still royal support, but despite the royal support, uh, homeopathy went into decline. The NHS pays no longer for it, and in a sense that created an example for the rest of Europe. France
mm.
followed. France has a long tradition in homeopathy. Hahnemann spent his last years of his life in Paris, and therefore
Oh,
the French are traditionally very fond of homeopathy, and the healthcare system in France paid for it and now has stopped paying for it. The Germans are still struggling with that, but since about five years or so, there's a vocal opposition uh, um, opposed to homeopathy, and it's a question of time that the insurance system in Germany will consider its position on homeopathy.
yeah, definitely, as they should. But you mentioned integrative medicine. Now, from my perspective, integrative medicine is basically just taking regular medicine and adding in aspects of alternative medicine into it. Is that correct? Is it just something medicine in disguise, or what exactly is that?
Well, there's a history in all this terminology. We used to call it fringe medicine. That was perhaps unacceptably hostile. Then we
Mm,
called it alternative medicine. And then people realized that it can't possibly be an alternative if it doesn't work. Then people called it complementary medicine. And that was my chair in Exeter, was complementary medicine, emphasizing the fact that it's used in addition. And to be even more politically correct, people began to call it integrative medicine, which means an integration on the same level. It's not just an add-on, as you say, but it's considered an integrative part of it. So, as somebody once said, if you integrate cow pie into apple pie, you don't make the apple pie more tasty.
yeah.
Uh, and that's precisely what it is. It is a clever ploy to make people think that integrative medicine is it's very open to new ideas, etc., politically correct, but actually it is just admitting quackery by the back door.
Ah, that
Because
back door also comes with the cowboy part.
yeah, if something did really work, then it would be submitted to the scrutiny of evidence-based medicine, and then there's nothing against integrating it. What I'm trying to say that the principle of integration is already does already exist in evidence-based medicine.
Hmm.
Evidence-based medicine isn't closed and says it has to become it has to come from science and from a pharmaceutical factory. Otherwise, we don't consider it. Evidence-based medicine considers everything that is supported by good evidence, and therefore the principle of integrated medicine is just idiotic.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, the thing is that there's something I was having a conversation with my father yesterday, a couple of days back actually, and we're talking about and you also saw a lot of patients recover when you gave them homeopathic medicine. And there are several books and many real life accounts. And of course, people swear that once they took homeopathic medicine, it cured them of something or it improved their condition somewhat. Now, of course, this could be a combination of a variety of things, the placebo effect and confirmation bias, etc. But how does this happen when it comes to infants? What do you think that happens? Like, because they don't have a confirmation bias set in. And the same goes with pets. A lot of people try to give their pets homeopathic medicines and they seem to get much better after that.
Mm.
So how does one explain that sort of thing?
Well, exactly like you explained it with adults, the placebo effect is operative in animals and in children. In fact, if you remember good old Pavlov, he has discovered the
Yeah.
placebo effect and he's discovered it in animals, not in humans. So the placebo effect exists. It's a little bit more complicated. I'm trying to keep it simple, and in it exists also as the placebo effect by proxy. If the mother is convinced that the baby cries less and sleeps better, then perhaps the baby cries less and sleeps better through the reduced anxiety of the mother. But that's just one of the factors. The other factors of importance are regression towards the mean,
Hmm.
uh, natural history of the disease. Things do get better by themselves. And in a single case, whether it's your father or the mother of the child or a keeper of an animal, in a single case, these people can never say that it was the treatment that worked. This is the logic of 300 years ago. And look where we were 300 years ago in terms of curing disease. Medicine advanced to its present stage as soon as we realized that we cannot go by experience. Experience is completely, or can be completely, utterly misleading. We need clinical trials, and the invention of the clinical trials is probably the biggest breakthrough in medicine of all the big breakthroughs that we had. Only in a properly conducted clinical trial can we sort out all these confounding factors and biases and say, yes, it probably was truly the treatment that caused the effect that we are observing.
And of course, with pets as well, pets do like being taken care of, and they are given all sorts of medicines at different times. And a lot of people give them both alternative medicines as well as mainstream medicines to
I
treat
forgot
them.
to say something rather important. If
Hmm.
you look at the trials in children and animals using homeopathy, you find exactly the same thing as with adult human beings, namely, it doesn't work. So people who say, oh, it has worked in my child and therefore that is enough proof, these people then ought to explain that if I do a proper clinical trial, why doesn't it happen then? The answer is obviously because a proper clinical trial cuts out all the biases and confounding factors. And this is just proof that the experience these people report is wrong. wrongly interpreted. Of course, they do get better. It would be foolish to say your child or your dog or your grandpa didn't get better. That would imply they're lying or they're dishonest. The child got better, but the interpretation of the fact that the child got better is wrong. The child got better not because of the homeopathic remedy, but the child would have got better even without the homeopathic remedy.
That is an important factor. And you also wrote a lot about acupuncture. And have you also studied acupressure at all?
Yeah, well, the thing is, acupuncture usually is sticking a needle into the skin of a patient.
Mm,
And the aim of doing that is to stimulate an acupuncture point. Now, you can stimulate an acupuncture point with all sorts of other things. You can put ultrasound on it, can put pressure on it, you can shine light on it, you can put electricity on it, etc. So there are dozens of different forms of acupuncture. And we try to cover them all. In clinical trials, you can't do everything, of course, but in
mm,
the systematic reviews that we did, we usually included any form of acupuncture. If we do a systematic review of acupuncture for back pain, which I mentioned earlier, then
hmm
we would also consider acupuncture forms like acupressure, electroacupuncture, etc.
Ah,
And
okay. So,
and and one form of acupuncture isn't very much different from another in the sense that the evidence is
mhm.
and usually quite unconvincing. Whether you apply a needle, electricity, or pressure doesn't matter.
Yeah, I tried it a couple of times. When I was a kid, of course, living in India, you get all sorts of homeopathy and a lot of other things that get thrown around, including Ayurveda and stuff. Even my mother has been a very strong, maybe not a strong believer, but you hear one of these things that if you start coughing or you're choking on something, then you should hold the base of your thumb very tightly, and that should ease the coughing. And for a long time, even I did that. There was one where you press the bridge of your nose to quell a headache, which I have tried and it did not work. My headaches are
Mhm.
very persistent when they happen. But only recently I had a conversation where I said that you will stop coughing eventually. That will take just a couple of minutes as whatever you're choking on comes out and your airway clears. So
Yeah,
whether you press it or not, probably not going to do much. But it's a very good
exactly.
excuse to slap someone on the back, especially if it's your husband.
The best trick of any type of alternative medicine is to treat conditions that are self-limiting. And coughing is excellent. Common cold is also excellent.
Yeah.
It'll take 10 days if you treat it, and 1.5 weeks if you don't treat it.
Yeah, exactly. That's that old adage. That's a absolutely precious. So, have you done any research on Ayurveda or any Ayurvedic compounds or preparations of that sort?
No, not a lot. We once had a visiting scholar from uh, Sri Lanka, I think, and he started doing some interesting work in terms of
Mhm.
a systematic review, um, but then left and never finished it. So we had to pick up the leftovers, so to speak, and we published that. But that was the only time we ever looked into Ayurveda, except for uh, looking at the dangers of alternative medicine. And there I've published, I think, three or three or four reviews of the dangers of Ayurvedic medicine. As you know better than I do, they are adulterated, contaminated, etc., etc., and often have very dubious ingredients which damage your liver and other organs. So
Yeah.
my advice to anybody around here, of course, in India, that's a much more problematic advice. But my advice is stay well clear of Ayurveda.
Ah, that's very good advice. Of course, most people are not going to take it. As in the advice, unfortunately, not. They're going to still keep taking Ayurveda. It's so deeply ingrained in our culture that it's really hard to tear away from. As a kid, I used to have something called Chawanprash, which is like a massive conglomeration of like 50 different ingredients. Everybody makes it in a different way, and it comes out in this black, gooey paste. It doesn't look appetizing at all, but people swear by it that it's supposed to build your, make it, give your immunity a boost, give all sorts of things. Like it's supposed to make you superhuman, but as is evident, Indians are not yet superhumans as much as we wish we were. but and but there is a Western equivalent to Ayurveda in a way, I feel, at least from my perspective, and that's naturopathy. Now, what exactly is it? I've had a very hard time trying to put naturopathy together. It just seems like a vague collection of ideas. There's no central dogma or ideology behind it. What have you learned about it?
Yeah, I don't blame you for being confused about it. Uh, it 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 is very confusing because so many people understand different things by it. Basically, if you just analyze what the terminology means, it means using the means nature provides for treating and diagnosing people. So, what does nature provide? Nature provides heat, cold, pressure. All of these things are used in naturopathy. Naturopathy gets particularly well known for its herbal supplements, but that's just one element of many. So, the father of, or one of the fathers of naturopathy was a priest, a Bavarian priest. So it's another German invention. And he was famous for the water cures. He cured everything, including himself.
Ooh,
So,
whoa,
so often,
doesn't inspire
if you go back
confidence.
to the history, so often these inventors of modalities uh, famous for curing themselves or started by curing themselves and then became enthusiasts. So he was called Sebastian Kneipp and he cured his own tuberculosis with cold water treatments.
Oh,
Cold water treatments are supposed to boost your immunity. We did a trial of this a long time ago, and it seemed to show that if you take intermittent hot and cold showers every day, and you do that regularly, you suffer less from the common cold than people who don't do it. It wasn't a brilliant trial, I have to say, but it was interesting. Sadly, we never followed this up, or nor did anybody else. But the notion that water treatments are good for protecting you via the immune system is very widespread. And anyway, that's roughly why naturopathy is such a diffuse area, because then people add vitamins to it. Some people say detox is an important element. Some people even say homeopathy is part of naturopathy, which is
wow.
nonsense. Which is nonsense, but most American colleges of naturopathy teach homeopathy. So it is confused the area, and I don't blame you for not understanding it. I'm not sure I understand it.
But I've heard some horrific things, like especially there's a lady called Britt Marie Hermes who is settled in Germany at this point of time, I think. She was American. She is American. And she used to be a naturopath. And so I managed to learn whatever I could from her, from at least from her, the talks that I've seen of hers. And she mentioned some really horrific practices like giving people with cancer certain banned substances which I think her boss was importing from from a different country,
Mm.
but giving them potentially poisonous things. There have been people who have been killed by naturopathy because there have been a couple of cases where apparently somebody tried to give a vitamin C direct infusion, a high concentration of it, and the person just went into shock and died right then and there. So it's really horrible things that people do in the name of this, of naturopathy. And it's, hey, we've got a ministry supporting that as well. Even though the N is not mentioned in the Ministry of Ayush, apparently it's in there somewhere. It's a silent N. But
Wow.
we've got
Yeah,
colleges and things about that stuff.
that's a very interesting story because we had just published a systematic review of this herbal anti-cancer drug that you mentioned, and it's called Ukraine. The Ukraine because the inventor came from Ukraine. He went to Vienna and then marketed this very strange anti-cancer drug and got imprisoned for all sorts of fraudulent activity. And Bridget Hermes had to use it in her College of Naturopathy in America.
Mhm.
This is how I came into contact. And I think I'm partly guilty of turning her off naturopathy because
Way to
she
go. That's something you should be guilty of. That's fantastic.
and I met her several times. She's a charming lady, and you're right. She now lives in Germany and has done a PhD in a proper science. So she's thoroughly converted and is now one of us.
Wonderful. You know what? This gives me a great idea. I really need to get her on the show.
She's brilliant.
Yeah, so I've seen and so I've heard. So time to get to know that in person. And what are some of the strangest things that you have found in your studies about alternative medicine? Let's say about naturopathy or acupuncture. Has there some really surprising things popped out at you?
Well, our very first study was perhaps also the most surprising. One day, somebody rang the doorbell on my private home in Exeter, and this was a middle-aged lady, and she said, "I heard that you are going to study faith healing." I said, I have no intention to do that. Yes, she said, you said in a radio interview that you will study those treatments which are most commonly used in the UK. And I did say that in order to emphasize that as coming from Germany, I wasn't going to bring in all sorts of weird stuff from Germany that is of no relevance to the UK. So I looked it up, and lo and behold, faith healing was one of the commonest alternative treatments in the UK.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so I was taken by my word, and we found some funding for a study, and we did. The funding was quite generous in the sense that we were allowed to design the trial after receiving the okay for the funding. So we didn't have to submit a full protocol, but could develop that protocol after receiving the financial support. So we assembled 5 faith healers of good reputation, and I told them we want to do a clinical trial testing faith healing, and my research question is whether it's any better than a placebo, because I have no doubt that your patients benefit from it, but I have much doubt that they benefit from the face healing per se.
Hmm.
Uh, it would be a placebo effect or whatever else. So we had long discussions, and we came up with the idea altogether. It was a consensus that we would find 5 actors which were almost lookalike, the same age groups, etc., who would be trained to pretend to be faith healers by the faith healers. Uh,
Wow.
Everybody liked that idea, and we went ahead. They trained their counterparts, the actors. Then we had another meeting, and they came to me and said, "We can't do this study because while training our actors, we discovered that they all have healing power as well."
Oh, wow. Anybody
So,
can be a faith healer.
so basically, they were predicting that the study that we had designed would not show a result, and that this would be due to both the actors and the face healers having healing energy. So,
Wow.
so we had a few more conferences, and I came up with the idea that we do the original trial, but 2 more groups included, and the third group, no, the additional group would receive the face healing by the face healer sitting in a cubicle which was obscured to the patient in a distance of 2 meters away from the patient, but the patient wouldn't see the face healer. And in the control group for that arm, there would be nobody in the cubicle. And we refined the method, and we even played a tape recording of human sounds like moving on the chair and so forth in the empty cubicle. So we had 4 groups: face healing like normal, face
Hmm.
healing administered by the actor, face healing like normal except from a cubicle at a 2-meter distance, and nothing at all delivered by the empty cubicle. So the trial happened, and it was, the condition we were treating was severe chronic pain. We cooperated with our local pain clinic, and there were
Hmm.
plenty of people so badly affected that they were in wheelchairs. And one day I remarked that some of the patients that I had seen arriving in wheelchairs were walking.
Hmm.
So I wasn't involved in the trial anymore, but I could talk to these patients. My colleagues were running the trial, and I said, "Haven't I seen you in a wheelchair a few weeks ago?" And the patient said, "Yes. Whatever is happening there in the laboratory is marvelous. I I've been in the wheelchair since 5 years, and now I'm walking." So I thought, we are doing miracles here.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And the trial eventually was finished, and we analyzed the group, then the groups, the results, and then we opened the random code, and the results were truly amazing. If anything at all, the 2 control groups had better results than the face healing groups. So
Wow. Wait.
if you want, the differences were not significant, but if you wanted to exaggerate that, then doing nothing is better than face healing. Right? In any case, what we did show was that there was no difference, no statistical difference in pain reduction, and these remarkable cases of people giving up wheelchairs happened in all the groups, distributed evenly throughout all the groups. This, for me, was the most remarkable lesson to demonstrate how much not just the placebo effect, but all the other effects like regression towards the mean very important. The natural history of the condition, etc., can achieve.
Mm.
And earlier we talked about the how utterly misleading experience can be. This, for me, showed it clearer than anything else. Because if I had selectively told just those patients who had abandoned wheelchairs that they
Hmm.
had healing, they would have been convinced for the rest of their lives that the healing power is actually curative. And in fact, it is nothing. If anything, it's worse than doing nothing.
Oh my goodness. I've just had an interview with Holy Kool-Aid or Thomas Westbrook from the YouTube channel called Holy Kool-Aid, where he's compiling an entire series of videos. He's making an entire series of videos on faith healing. So
Mhm.
this is going to go very well with that. Again, link in the description for everybody who's watching. And but this is fascinating. This
By the way, I should mention this. This was published in the journal Pain. So
oh.
if you go on Medline and put my name into spiritual healing, we call it in the
Hmm.
public journal Pain, you'll find the actual publication, and you can see that I'm not fantasizing. I'm telling the truth here.
I'm sure you are. And so that makes it that's very interesting. I'm curious though that the patient you spoke to who had been walking around, which group were they in? Do you
Well,
remember?
they were distributed evenly throughout all four groups.
Okay, so totally random. So at that point of time, you had no idea which group they were in.
No, I was head of department. I wasn't. I helped design the study, but as
Hmm.
soon as the study started, I wasn't involved anymore. I had people doing that because I was too busy otherwise.
That's ingenious. That is completely genius study design. Having an empty box. That's fantastic. I think even like I mentioned to Thomas, there's Darren Brown, who the British mentalist. He trained an actor to be a faith healer as well. And there was an entire TV show about it. I think there was a series or if it was a feature-length documentary or something of that sort where he taught that person how to do faith healing, all the motions, how to behave, how to speak, and how to interact with all the people in the congregation. And even when he came out and he admitted that he was a fraud, everybody still believed that he had healing powers. So this goes to show how powerful faith healing is. But speaking of the placebo effect, nowadays there's a lot of people who are giving the placebo effect a lot of credence. There are people who have put comments in my videos, and there are others who have basically said that I want to go ahead with this just for the placebo effect. So now there are certain effects that placebos have. There are even placebo surgeries, which seem to have a lot of effect in certain situations. But could you give us the experienced professional description of what a placebo is and why it has the effect it has and what that effect really is?
No, there you need somebody more clever than I am.
I seriously doubt
No,
that, but give it a shot. Give it a shot.
that to put it simply, placebo stands on 2 feet. One is the classic Pavlov conditioning. Pavlov conditioned. He rang a bell and fed
Yeah.
his dogs at the same time. He did that many times, repetition, and he measured gastric secretion because the dog starts with gastric secretion as soon as they know they get some food, as we
Mm.
do. So
Salivating.
then he uh, stopped giving food, just rang the bell
Hmm.
and measured gastric secretion, and the gastric secretion started just by ringing the bell. That phenomenon is called conditioning.
Hmm.
And the human example would be I go to the dentist because I have dental pain, but I'm very afraid of dentists. I go and I sit in the waiting room and I'm getting more and more anxious. And all of a sudden, I notice my dental pain is gone. Uh, that or you go to the doctor and you think you're going to tell him about this and that problem, and as soon as you're with the doctor, you notice that the problem has gone, and
Mm.
you feel a fool because you have nothing to report to your doctor.
Mm.
Uh, uh, you're conditioned to get better as soon as you see the doctor. Basically, that's putting things rather simple. The other and that is the conditioning is an unconscious phenomenon.
Mm.
You cannot control it.
Mm.
The second foot that the placebo stands on is expectation. That is a conscious problem. I expect to get better uh, when I take a pill. I have a headache. I take an aspirin, and 2 minutes later, my pain has gone. Uh, and that is a pure placebo effect. Why? Because the aspirin takes longer to work pharmacologically,
Mm.
2 minutes. So if it's gone after 2 minutes, it's the placebo effect. You can be sure of that. These two elements basically make up the placebo effect. Uh, Now, the question is, why is the placebo effect not a proper justification for using things like homeopathy? The simple answer to that is because I don't need homeopathy in order to create a placebo effect. If you have a health problem, you come to me and I treat it properly, for instance, with a pharmaceutical drug that is known to be effective, and I empathize with you and I listen to you and I give you enough time to explain your problem, etc., etc., I generate a placebo effect. So you will benefit from the placebo effect plus from the pharmaceutical effect of the drug that I prescribe. In other words, if I only give you a homeopathic remedy, you don't have the benefit of the pharmaceutical drug. You have the benefit of the placebo, but I cheat you out of the main component of you getting better, namely the specific effect of the drug.
Yeah.
In other words, in most instances, giving a placebo in clinical practice is dishonest.
Mm.
And being dishonest is unethical, and therefore it's no good. There are many other reasons, like if you have a treatable condition, then it's better to treat it rather than to give a placebo, because the placebo effect is short-lived. We don't
Mm.
understand exactly why some people respond to placebo effect and why not, others not, and why it is short-lived and mostly short-lived, sometimes very short-lived, sometimes a bit longer. But on average, it is short-lived, and you certainly can't cure uh,
Mm.
disease with a placebo effect. You can alleviate the symptoms, but you don't cure it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That brings to mind a very interesting thing. Like a lot of people claim that homeopathy, Ayurveda, a lot of these alternative medicines treat a disease from the root cause. Whereas modern medicine only treats the symptoms, which I find like is exactly the opposite. It's backwards from what is actually the case. Because in modern medicine, we understand germ theory, we understand what cancers are, we understand what causes diabetes, where the central problems are, and we try to manage those using evidence-based treatments from as close to the root as we can get. Like if you want to
Mm.
get rid of a cancer, there is radiation therapy to target exactly that cancer. Or we have specially designed chemotherapy regimes They're not pleasant, but they work. Now, whereas in things like homeopathy, the medicines, the preparations are made from substances that are thought to cause the symptoms of the disease you have, and then diluted to the extent where they are supposed to cure the disease, but they don't know the root cause of it. They don't even understand germ theory, and yet they're here trying to treat it. How can that be a how can there be a root treatment? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
The notion of treating the root cause is hugely attractive to consumers.
Yeah,
Because they often feel that modern medicine is just putting a sticking plaster on a deeper problem, whereas the long history taking in homeopathy goes really much deeper, and therefore it makes sense from the perspective of the practitioner. It also makes
yeah,
sense because the practitioner is being taught that the root cause of the disease is the imbalance of life energies. If you think of
exactly.
acupuncture, you fall ill, according to acupuncturists, because
Hmm,
your yin and yang are out of balance, and to put it back into balance, you need to stick needles into acupuncture points, and you need to do that well. You need to have studied acupuncture. This is a misunderstanding about the pathogenesis of disease because they have their own totally invented theories which have no foundation in fact. They can claim and are being taught in the schools and in every single book that you open about alternative medicine. You find this claim treating the deeper cause of the disease, and they believe it. They're absolutely adamant because they believe that the stuff about yin and yang and life energy and so forth, and they think that modern medicine studying molecular mechanisms, etc., is missing the target. It's a fundamental misunderstanding. I can understand how it happened, but I can tell you it is complete bullshit.
exactly. It is. It's surprising how people, even with the least bit of critical thinking about that claim, you can understand what the deep problems that lie within it. And when it comes to this life energy, like even chiropractic, it basically says that your life energy and all diseases stem from the spine. So straightening the spine will straighten your life in that manner of sense and your health in a manner of speaking. But a lot of people like on TikTok, and of course we TikTok is banned in India, but on Instagram, on YouTube, there are a lot of people having these images of these chiropractors yanking their necks and twisting their heads and their hips and stuff like that all over the place. I've had a little bit of such adjustments, and yes, it did help when it comes to things like neck pain or like what do you call it, spondylitis. But is there, and I've heard that chiropractic also has, most chiropractors have now started using whatever they know on in ways that actually work. But there are, I think it's getting popular in rather unfortunate circumstances. Are there applications that you've seen that where chiropractic actually helps, where it works, where it can be supported by evidence?
Well, chiropractic is a big subject. There are two different types of chiropractors. The ones that are more modern and up to date are called the mixers because they mix methods into the original principles of chiropractic, and the other ones are called the straights because they are straightforward, perpetuating the gospel of D.D. Palmer, who invented chiropractic 120 years ago, and who said that virtually all human illness originates from subluxations of the spine. And if the spine is subluxated, then the life energy cannot circulate, and therefore the spine needs adjusting, and then everything is fine again. And Palmer did not advocate primarily chiropractic manipulations for back pain or neck pain. His first patient was a deaf man who he cured from his deafness by manipulating his upper spine. The second patient he allegedly cured was somebody who had coronary heart disease and an angina, and he cured his coronary heart disease by manipulating his spine. The fact that this is nonsense is pretty obvious to everybody. What is not so clear is whether chiropractic and spinal manipulation is nonsense for back pain. There, the evidence is very mixed. I'm not convinced that it works even for back pain, and I'm convinced that it is quite dangerous for neck pain, because if you manipulate the neck, you can basically break an artery that supplies the brain, a part of the brain, and then you have a stroke. And when you have a stroke, you can be dead very quickly. So there are hundreds of cases reported in the medical literature where this has happened. And to this, we have to add that there's no reporting system. So nobody reports these cases. Therefore, a few hundred cases being reported are very significant. Probably the true figure is in the tens of thousands.
Oh,
Nobody will ever manipulate my neck. I can tell you that. And I advise anybody who's listening to this not to let anybody, whether it's a physiotherapist, whether it's an osteopath or a chiropractor, manipulate your neck. Or indeed, whether it's a doctor, because some doctors do it too.
my goodness. So this is a lot more troublesome than I thought. I didn't know that there were tens of thousands. Well, yes, it has to be reported properly. And the does that happen almost immediately? Does that stroke take place like almost immediately while they're on that funky looking
Sometimes,
bed?
sometimes
Or does it take
it
time?
happens immediately. Sometimes what happens, the artery is injured
Mm-hmm.
and blood clot forms in order to repair that. And
Mm-hmm.
then the blood clot grows and eventually dislodges into the brain. And then you have a stroke maybe 3 days later. And so many cases are happening where the connection isn't made. Imagine your grandmother having neck pain, getting her neck manipulated, and 3 days later, your father finds her dead in her bed. Who's making the connection to the chiropractor? Nobody. The unknown might be absolutely overwhelmingly big. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact, as I said, there's no monitoring system. We know it's dangerous, but for one reason or another, and I let you guess what the reasons are, chiropractors have not established a monitoring system.
Oh my goodness. Well, guys, if you're watching this and if you go to the chiropractor or if you're planning to go to the chiropractor, please don't. I guess the mixers might treat you a little bit better, but why take a chance with that sort of thing? Why get your neck broken over something that can be easily fixed with a normal massage or just a trip to I don't know, an orthopedist?
On,
Just
on,
go.
on top of it, two more things. The mixers are called mixers because basically they have stolen modalities from physiotherapy. So
Ah.
if you want a mixer, why don't you go to the professional and go to a physiotherapist?
Or they can go to the bar and have a cocktail. That's a nice mixer as well. Just kidding. Anyway, if it comes back to you, do let me know. But I think we've taken up quite a bit of your time. Thank you so much for that. We've packed in a lot of information into a relatively short period of time, I have to say. So I will definitely get back to you. I think we have a lot more that we can unpack. First of all, thank you so much for your work. Your work has been absolutely phenomenal. It's been very inspiring for me as well. I think we need maybe a whole bunch more people exactly like you to be all over the world to do the kind of work that you've done to research alternative medicine and bring it to the light of evidence so that we can figure out what's going on, because I honestly think like even Ayurveda has might have a lot of potential. but the studies are just not being done well. They're not being done right. Like even Patanjali, as you had critiqued their paper for Corona Kit, there were a lot of holes in that paper. There are a lot of holes in a lot of the Ayurvedic studies that are being done right now. So, more power to you and to everybody you have inspired and all the work that you've done. Edzard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I should maybe mention that if you're interested in following up new publications and my criticism of lots of them, then you should maybe go on my blog, which is just Edzard Ernst in one word.com.
Mhm.
And I post a new article virtually every day, mostly
Wow.
on criticism of what has just been published in alternative medicine. So there you will see all the latest studies, and it's a very lively blog. If you ever wanted or feel the urge to insult me, everybody else starts on that blog. So you can happily join in, and I'll see you there. Cheerio.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll put the link in the description and you can follow Edzard on Twitter as well. What is your Twitter handle again?
I have no idea.
I'll put that down in the description, okay, as well.
It's
So,
probably my name again. But
yeah, yeah.
thanks for inviting me. See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you so much. And
Bye.
guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Rationable Conversations with Edzard Ernst, and that has been very illuminating indeed. If you like this, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so that you get notified next time the next video comes out. Also, you can support me on Patreon, and I have started these memberships. Actually, I have started the YouTube memberships. You'll see a post on that very soon. So please do join me, support this channel, and so that I can get more amazing people on here to have conversations like we did for Edzard today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then, be rational.